Sheri and I welcome the audience and watchers to this podcast episode of the ICA Health and Wellness Committee in January. We have Sheri Rolf with us here today. Sheri, thank you very much for accepting the invitation and preparing for this podcast. We'll be talking about head and neck alignment for instrument playing. And let me introduce you first, and then we can go ahead and delve into this topic. Sheri is sometimes called Doctor because she has an MD and a DMA. As a board-certified otolaryngologist-head and neck surgeon with a DMA in clarinet performance, she brings a unique perspective to the health and wellness of the clarinetist. Sheri has performed as a soloist with the University of Louisville Orchestra, the Sewanee Festival Orchestra, the Winds of Montana, and the Cologne Chamber Orchestra. She has given both performances and presentations at a number of ClarinetFests, as well as at regional clarinet and single reed events. Currently, Dr. Rolf plays in the Great Falls Symphony and is an artist member of the Yellowstone Chamber Players. Her publications have appeared in medical, veterinary, and lay journals. So, again, Sheri, thank you for accepting the invitation. Before we start, actually, when I did research on your expertise, I saw that there was an article from a number of years ago in which it said that the clarinetist saved the conductor from dying. There was a rehearsal at one of the orchestra rehearsals, and the conductor suffered, I believe, stroke, if I remember correctly, or heart attack.
Heart attack.
So you recognize that right on the spot. You rushed there, you helped the person, and you guys called for help, and with your assistance until medical people arrived, you were able to help that person, conductor, and then he recovered. So I thought that was a great blessing. You were there and you had the expertise, as well as the presence, mental and spiritual presence to do that. How did it happen? Just in nutshells.
It was at a rehearsal, and it's interesting that they titled the article something about saves conductor at rehearsal heart attack, but it wasn't a rehearsal heart attack, it was the real thing. As we were rehearsing, I could see that he was just not feeling well, and he was perspiring pretty much, and of course the hall gets very warm, so that was not that unusual. And he went over and sat down on the piano bench briefly, and he said, "Let's go ahead and take our break now." And he walked off and went into his little green room. I shook my head and I said, "I'm going to go check on Gordon. Something isn't right." And I went, and he had locked the door on the green room. And so I banged on the door, Gordon, and he kind of limped over, I guess. Anyways, he opened the door and kind of fell back into his chair. And, so I saw that he was diaphoretic, and I checked his pulse, and it was kind of thready. And I said, "You're having a heart attack, and this is not where you need to be. We need to get you to the hospital as soon as possible." So your MD medical expertise came very, very handy, and I'm sure you had other stories that you helped people, performers, with your medical expertise, as you have decades behind you in the clarinet world as well as in the medical world. So you are a head and neck specialist, Sheri, and we will be talking about the head and neck alignment for instrumental, for clarinet playing.
Let's take it from the general. What can we say about the whole body regarding clarinet playing or clarinetist?
I think it's important, Saba, that we realize that the entire body is involved in playing the instrument. We study and we get so involved in just the embouchure and then the hand position and wiggling the fingers appropriately. And a lot of the other aspects of the body are just totally ignored, essentially. So I think that's one thing that it's just important to realize, that it's not just bringing in air, blowing air through the instrument, and getting the fingers in the right place at the right time. If you don't think of the whole thing, the parts just don't seem to work as well together.
So the head and neck relationship as well as function have or has a really profound effect on the whole body. And it begins with the foundation, as you say. What is the foundation regarding the head and neck that we can pinpoint, we can talk about?
Well, the spine is probably the most central to the position of the head and neck. It really supports the head and neck. And there are curves in the spine. It's shaped kind of like an S. That is, as a result of that, the spine is able to support more weight. If the spine were straight, we wouldn't have nearly the flexibility and the weight-bearing capabilities. For me, one of the most interesting things is how the head balances on the body. I think maybe alignment might be better served as balance of the head and neck. Now, it all starts with the uppermost vertebra, which is known as the atlas. Of course, Atlas carried all the world, and the atlas in the top of our neck carries the weight of our head. The head, the skull rather, has two condyles. They're occipital condyles, and they're sort of like I wouldn't say cup-shaped, but they're shaped to fit into the axis, into special grooves that are in there to receive it. And the reason I think this is so important is that if you get the head balanced right, it takes very little energy to support it, because it's engineered, if you will, to support itself on the spine.
How does the head being balanced on the top of the atlas or the AO joint help with generally clarinet playing and performance?
Well, there are a number of reasons why it's important and why it helps. If you think about a rocking chair, If you walk up to a rocking chair, it's just sitting there, right? I mean, it's balanced on its rails. Now, let's suppose you tip that rocking chair forward. If you want it to stay in that position, it's going to require a certain amount of effort on your part to hold it in that position, because that's not really where it wants to go. And so the same is true with our head. And the reason why that's important is because there are a lot of muscles hooked up in the neck to the base of the skull. And when you think about it, if you're having to expend energy or tension to keep your head in an unnatural position, well, all of those muscles are working to do things that they wouldn't necessarily need to do. And a lot of people don't realize that there's a muscle called the levator scapulae that comes from the base of the skull, hooks into the back of the scapula, and helps keep your scapula lifted up. Now, if that muscle gets tense, the next thing that's going to happen is all the muscles downstream from that are going to get tense too. And so you're expending a lot of energy, creating a lot of tension in the body. And I've seen some people play with so much tension that it's scary. But that's not a free and natural way to play. And it expends a lot of unnecessary effort and puts a lot of stress and strain.
Absolutely. And if that levator scapulae is connected from the base of the skull to the scapulas, then if those are tense, I believe then the breathing apparatus is restricted too. Besides that tenseness can go on to the arms, the upper extremities, and cause malfunction to any degree possible.
You're absolutely spot on with that. That's what I meant when I said once that muscle starts getting tense, the tension follows downstream, down into the arm and the hand. And you're right. The other thing about the neck is that there are an awful lot of nerves that run down through and around these muscles that are in the neck. One especially comes out between the scalene muscles, which are other muscles that are hooked to the base of the skull. And it goes down and just the nerves weave in and out and around and merge and emerge. And I refer to it as the electrician's nightmare. It's something you memorize in school, but unless you're a neurologist or you're involved in doing like interscalene blocks as an anesthesiologist, it's something that you once you've passed the test, you can call it an electrician to fix it after that.
That's right. And so besides nerves and muscles, we have the arteries there, we have our windpipe there.
Right.
The base of the tongue is pretty much inside or among those neck muscles holding. So it is, as I really loved what you say, that what happens in the neck doesn't stay in the neck.
Right.
And so I absolutely see that. And so that's why it is so crucial what is happening in the neck and head area and how that affects the rest of the body. Let's talk a little bit about the atlanto-occipital joint. You mentioned a few things about it, that there are some grooves on it, and it upholds the cup gliding bottom of the skull.
so it better really glides and aids us in moving the head.
Yes.
What are some other functions that it might be important for a clarinetist to know about the AO joint in relation to this?
Well, it's an interesting thing that the center of gravity of the head is kind of forward. And something that I have observed in a lot of clarinetists is that as they play, the head goes forward. Now, when that happens, as we said before, it expends a certain amount of energy to try to keep the head in that position because that's just not naturally where it belongs. And if over a long period of time, this person continues to play like that, pretty soon they're going to walk hunched over. Sometimes you've seen people with a lump on the top of their back. It's called a dowager's hump. And the head just keeps moving more and more forward, which affects the balance of the whole body. Short term, and I mean, that is if you're talking just about when you're playing the clarinet. Again, you have the issue of having the muscles in the back of the neck working harder than they need to support this unnatural position. And not only that, as you said, the larynx and trachea are here inside. They have to bend a little bit too. And so that's bound to influence the airflow to maybe to a minuscule extent, but to some extent for sure.
Absolutely. And I would say position of the tongue as well. So it's only affected at the root of the tongue at the hyoid bone. So that goes with it. Since it's hyoid bone is suspended by muscles. So that is one bone that is not connected to any other bone on muscle.
It is in fact the only bone in the body that's not connected directly to another bone.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you. So our goal as musicians, clarinetists, to play tension-free, because when we don't have tension, our muscles are flexible. They are toned though, but they are flexible still, and they don't carry unnecessary burden, unnecessary weight. They are not posed into unnecessary positions. So they really able to move and function the way it was intended for the body. How do we attain that tension-free playing? And once we attain, or before we attain, how do we recognize? Because some of us might be in a position for decades or for years or for months that we are not even aware of our tendencies. But if something is off, how do we recognize that we are off?
Well, sometimes you mentioned the Alexander technique earlier, and he was able, when he lost his speech, by self-observation in a mirror over a period of time, to come to the realization that the alignment was screwed up, so to speak, and he was able to self-correct that. Now, I think a lot of people are not capable of doing that. So, again, a course in Alexander technique was extremely helpful to try to get into that neutral, natural position that will let you play more freely. That would be, I think, the most helpful thing for most folks. Now, another thing that we haven't really mentioned is that how many times have you seen someone play, and when they start to play, their shoulders come up like this, okay? And that is, if an instructor sees that, yeah, point it out for sure. If the teacher sees that the student is leaning his or her head forward to play, yeah, point that out. See if there's if you can help them get it fixed. One thing that I like to think of is that the ears and the shoulders are mortal enemies.
Explain a little bit.
Well, what I mean by that is you don't want to let them get close together. You want to keep the ear and the shoulders as far apart as you reasonably can, which means not this in any way, but just a relaxed position where the ear is far away from the shoulder.
It is, I catch myself sometimes having shoulders a little bit micro tensed. And it's sometimes harder because the emotional content of the piece would require me to summon up some emotions in me that might make me raise my shoulders. So, and I have to intentionally see that my body is a little bit separate from that emotion. I may express, I may do that, but not fully put my body into that particular emotion that might make me raise my shoulder. So, so going on shoulders and the arms, you wrote and said that the arm movement exerts compressive force on the entire cervical spine. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? What do you mean by compressive force?
Well, whenever you do anything with the arms, like we've said, they're hooked on to muscles that come down from the skull, from the neck. And so whenever you do certain arm movements, it's going to cause various tensions on the cervical spine. And that's pretty much, I guess, what I was alluding to.
So compressive force it means tension.
Right.
Okay.
Tension, I think, is our key word here today.
Okay. You also mentioned that there is a downward pull when there's tension. How do we feel the downward pull, or is that easy to feel?
I don't think it's really very easy to feel. The muscles in the back of the neck are always in a certain state of tension because the head's center of gravity is forward, and so those muscles are always being stretched, and they have to be in order to keep the head from toppling off. I don't know. It's very difficult, I think, to a person has to be extraordinarily perceptive to try to pin down where all these where their tension areas are. For me, it's the rhomboids.
Okay.
Okay, when I think about it, I can get everything to relax. But if I'm actively doing something, an example would be riding a horse for a long distance, the muscle will let me know that I'm doing something that it doesn't like. It'll start to burn, and it'll hurt because it's saying, hey, I don't like what you're doing to me. Now, that's that example is like just too obvious. But to say, how are you going to diagnose your neck tension? I think, again, kind of referring back to your Alexander technique, one of the best ways to try to figure out where your tension is and try to alleviate it is a body scan. That being where you lie quietly, and I don't know, some people start at the foot, a lot of people start at the top of the skull, and just in your mind, work your way all the way down or all the way up the body. And pretty soon, after you've done that, or the first couple of times, it's not that easy because you got tension everywhere that you haven't noticed. But after a while, by practicing that, you can really self-diagnose, and you can actually feel the body areas that you have consciously told to relax. You can feel them starting to tense back up again, even though you've just assigned a command. Don't do that. Relax. But once you know those spots, it's much easier to work on those issues.
Yeah. Thank you. So what you suggest, it would be something like either relaxation or meditation, and then pretty much scanning through your body. Would you say it would be a standing, a sitting, or a laying down, semi-supine position? Which one would be more reasonable?
I think for most folks, it's easier in the supine position, lying down flat. And it doesn't have to be a rigid surface, although it can be. You can stretch out in bed and scan all the way up or down your body. Or you could lie on the floor, you could lie on the couch and do it. I think the important thing about it is visualizing that area of your body and moving through it, and feeling it give way and relax.
Thank you. Let's go to the muscles a little bit. What are the functions of the muscles? And I'm talking about basic function. Sometimes, we know muscles as moving the body, function for that, or smiling. It might be an obvious function of the muscles, but what are some of the other functions that we might not think of? And it is important that we know those functions so that we don't misdiagnose it.
Well, at a very basic level, every muscle's function is to contract and to relax. And muscles are paired so that when you have a muscle contract, the opposing muscle relaxes. And again, this goes back to the balance thing. So there are some muscles that function statically. Again, the nuchal muscles here on the back of the neck, they have a certain baseline of tension that they just have to have. But they also serve to stretch the spine. So they serve not only to keep your head hopefully not on your shoulders, but on your atlas, um, they they also, when they contract, tend to stretch out the spine, which is a very good thing. As you know, the intervertebral discs compress over time, and well, that's why as we age, we get a little shorter.
Okay, that's good. So muscles also stabilize, right?
Yes.
So whether it's the head or, as you mentioned, the balancing thing, it's pretty much a stabilization function. And then they also suspend when we talk about the shoulders. You know, the shoulders are essentially suspended over
Right.
the ribs. They're not tied to the ribs, but through the muscle, they are suspended over it. As well as the chest. That was, to me, that was a little revelatory that you mentioned that the muscles suspend the chest as well. Because I didn't think of the chest as being suspended, only the shoulders. Why is it good to know that the chest is suspended?
I think it helps you, when you think about it, develop a more relaxed breathing. Because the chest, well, it's also hooked onto the spine, but the rib cage in the front is definitely suspended. And again, you have the situation where if you have the suspension muscles pulling up on the chest, it's going to be hard to take a good, full, relaxed breath.
Yeah, absolutely. It totally makes sense. Totally makes sense. And I can see that the tension in the neck that spreads onto the shoulders pretty much will spread onto the chest, since the shoulders are over the whole rib cage, and the chest muscles are over the rib cage as well. So,
Now, interestingly, earlier you mentioned the hyoid bone. And there's a muscle called the omohyoid, very interesting little muscle that plugs in back under the tongue and chin, and just kind of circles around the hyoid. It's kind of like a fulcrum for it, and then it plugs in just over the top of the scapula. So here we go again with tension here. This is a muscle that you're going to engage whenever you form your embouchure, and it and its buddies are going to be involved whenever you move your tongue.
Interesting. So thinking about muscles, different muscles of the body and their relation to the tongue, medically, is there any relationship between the frontal abdominal muscle contraction and the tongue? What would you say?
There's no really direct relationship that of which I'm aware, but it's all hooked together ultimately.
Absolutely. Now, next, we mentioned, balance, and we mentioned tension-free playing, and mentioned the head, mentioned the spine, and mentioned some functional anatomy as well as muscle functions regarding posture. So, what are the benefits of an optimal or balanced posture that we might gain?
There's so many that I'm not quite sure where to begin. Um, let's start at the feet. If you're balanced, um, the balance really starts with the foundation, which is our feet. Um, so we want to make sure that um, the weight is evenly balanced, and you don't have too much weight on the heels or too much weight on the toes, which is going to cause tension that's going to creep up the legs. Um, from there, you just want to keep um, the legs in a relaxed position. You don't want to clamp the knees. Locking the knees is very bad. Um, and then we work our way on up. And again, we got the upper body. Now we're balanced. We got the head where it belongs. We've got the tension out of the shoulders. So we bring the instrument up to us as opposed to coming to get it. And that will help maintain it, maintain this posture while you're playing. Now, if you're sitting to play, your balance comes from the ischial tuberosities. Those are the sits bones. And so it's important, again, to have everything above be in balance, to have the sits bones underneath of us in a way that they are supporting us and not in a way that the back of the chair is doing most of the work. The slouched position, some of the elder statesmen of clarinet playing will recall Robert Marcellus, and his posture when playing was just, he slouched in the chair, had his legs crossed at the ankles, and so for a while, at least while I was growing up, that was the faddish thing. Everybody tried to sit like Robert Marcellus. Well, maybe not everybody, but a lot of folks did. Part of the thing was these guys in that era had developed a pretty good gut on them. And so that, for one thing, made it a little more difficult for them to sit in a perfect upright position. It was pulling them down. But truly, you're not going to breathe as well if you're in that position as if you're balanced. I don't know. I think I went off on a tangent. I'm not sure I answered your question.
Well, you mentioned a few things. So, what are the benefits of a balanced position? That was the main question. So, we could say that there's less energy expenditure, less work on the muscles.
Right.
What could you say? What else could be beneficial for us? Like if there's any stress-related benefit. Physical stress.
Excuse me?
What I mean is physical stress-related benefit.
Well, a balanced posture will definitely keep you from having your head pull forward and lead into the hunchback, round shouldered kind of, because the farther your head is forward from where it's supposed to be, the greater the load, just because of the angles. Kind of like they taught us in physics. You know, you're putting more stress on the system as you increase the angle at the back of the neck. I think that's the most important thing, is to try to keep your head on.
Yeah. And you mentioned the S curvature of the spine and the humping or hunching forward. And I think when that happens, that also changes the quality of the spine's curvature, right? To a detriment.
That is true. That is true. The cervical spine is lordotic, and that means that it curves toward the back. On the other hand, in the chest, it's kyphotic, which means that it goes forward. Then as you go down into the lumbosacral area, again, the concavity is forward. And the coccyx finishes out the S. So when your head goes forward, you are decreasing the curvature of the cervical spine. Again, over a long period of time, it's going to lead to, again, the permanent forward leaning of the head. And of course, that's hooked onto the chest. So the chest is going to do what it can to try to compensate for that.
Yeah, and also I think we also put unnecessary stress on the discs between the vertebrae on the frontal part, right?
That's true. Yeah, you don't want the spacing should be pretty even, but then when you compress those discs, it can lead to disc herniation over time. Not a pleasant thing to have, I'm told.
Yeah, absolutely. So that actually, let me just circle back a little bit about Robert Marshall's pose or posture as he was playing. How do you think it can be that although, based on your experience, what you saw, he had a really bad posture? So crossing the legs, which restricts blood flow, tenses up muscles, not just in the legs, but also in the back, lower back. Having the back of the seat upholding you, having the sit bone not really in the way, or even the sacrum not in the way, and the spine not in the way that it's supposed to normally, and still he produced a beautiful sound.
I'm sorry, my man. That was my phone.
No problem. So how do you think he could still manage to produce a beautiful sound, or maybe an effortless sound, as well as probably an effortless body posture? Medically speaking.
We used to think that the way he was slouched in the chair enabled him to breathe more deeply and fully and get more air into the lungs. And then if he was getting nearer the end of a long passage, he would simply compress down even more to get that last bit of air out. I don't know. I mean, he was absolutely remarkable. But his teachers kind of did the same thing. Oh, maybe not to that extent. When you look in the Bonnard Compendium for clarinet, and he's got some line drawings in there of clarinet players, and one has that slouched, awful posture. But the other one is sitting there with his head way forward, and that's lousy posture too, just in a different way. And I've oft looked at those diagrams and thought, wow, this is what a lot of people are looking at when they're in their developmental stages of playing.
So that tells me that he might have had the perfect awareness of his body, and still he could manage to not manipulate, but to bring into balance in those extreme positions. If he had such a line drawing of people's skeletal posture.
Whatever it was, it worked for him. I mean, it's kind of like, you look at some of the elite athletes and, baseball pitchers. You can't throw a ball like that.
Yeah.
Well, he's making, I don't know how many $1 million a year by doing that very thing. Now, he might not do it forever. I mean, that's a much more strenuous and activity, and so it's not really a direct comparison. But it's just the idea that some people are so gifted or talented at certain things that they can get them to work even though they really shouldn't. It's like bumblebees can fly, but if you take it to an aeronautical engineer, he would say, oh, this ain't going to work, So I got to shrug my shoulders on that one.
Okay. That was just a question that really popped in my head as you were talking about it. What are some of those external helpers that we can turn to? You mentioned the Alexander technique, or a third eye, or a third ear, second person to look at you, to pinpoint things for you. What are some of the things you have either experienced or you can recommend, and what are the reasons for those in your experience and expertise?
In terms of improving one's balance?
Balance, posture, tension, releasing tension, getting the necessary awareness. As you mentioned, one is Alexander technique. You already mentioned.
Right. And there are other things like Feldenkrais, what's the one? The Pilates can be helpful for that. Yoga can be very helpful. But caveat emptor here, there are no certifications for yoga instructors. So it's difficult sometimes to know whether the yoga instructor really knows what he or she is doing.
So my question, you mentioned Pilates and Rolfing. What are those two?
Well, Rolfing is a very deep massaged sort of technique. It actually goes in almost to the point of pain, or sometimes actually in the pain. And the idea that they have is that it's a progression of these massage. They aren't really massage. That's misleading. Massage makes you think, This is more of a, not in the moment is it going to feel that great, but it's a kind of delayed reaction. And once a person has gone through the whole gamut of stages, supposedly your muscle memory remembers, and that you can maintain that state of your body forever.
Okay.
Um, Personally, I think that's a little bit of a stretch, just simply because we all have bad habits, and even though Ida Rolf may have had, and by the way, I'm not related to her, even though she may have come up with this, and the idea was great, and it is great. I don't think it's a permanent fix. Just my opinion. Now, Pilates, I'm not that familiar with it. I've never done it, but again, it's an exercise technique, and I don't want to confuse here the Pilates techniques with the Feldenkrais method, but it evolved. If I'm misspeaking here, please tell me. But as I recall, it evolved, was developed by a prisoner of war.
I am not as familiar with Pilates in general. I know that Pilates has places emphasis on the mind and body connection,
Mm-hmm.
and but it's a 20th century thing. But I would have to look into that exactly. Who did that and how?
Yeah, that. As I sit here, that's probably not correct. But again, and I think Pilates relies more on what am I trying to say?
Strengthening?
Not, well, toning and stretching, of course, are part of it, but they use equipment. So it's not just as, the equipment makes it much easier to stretch and strengthen the muscles that they're aiming to work with. And the other techniques don't really use the equipment,
Okay.
I believe.
Okay. As far as I know, yes, we body mapping, algorithm technique, Feldenkrais, they don't use any equipment. Gentle touch and guidance, as well as drawing, sketches, anatomy. Great. So, in conclusion, what would you say, Sheri, as a head and neck, shoulder specialist, and you've had a lot of head, neck, and shoulder under your head in the past decades, what would you say? What would be some of the words that you could summarize for clarinetists?
Relax, balance, breathe.
In that order?
No, I think I would breathe above all else. Breathing is good. We get all upset if people stop breathing. Relaxation will actually help with the balance. So breathing, but breathing should be relaxed and not forced. Tightening the abdomen to try to breathe, that does nothing except creates tension. So breathing and relaxation are really sort of intertwined. And then what we've been talking about all along is the balance thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Would you say head balance, you would put that ahead of other parts of the body?
Well, where the head goes, the body follows. And so if you get the head where it belongs, and interestingly, once you've had someone guide you, and it's amazing that it feels amazing. It doesn't feel like your head's in the right spot. But once you've been able to work with that for a while, it just becomes
standard. Natural.
Yes. It's actually magical.
I've had that feeling quite a few times in my career, and it is great. It's like has a feeling of floating, like you're on the moon a little bit. You don't feel gravity as much, just the natural flow. Agree
totally. And it's sad that it's so little talked about, like within the medical profession. I think traditional medicine is starting to come around and look at more cause and effect, muscle balance things that can be remedied without the need for muscle relaxants or other such crutches. And that's really, really good.
Absolutely. Sheri, I think we've talked about a lot of things, a lot of good things. So we hope that it was very beneficial to the audience. And I thank you for being here with us and also spending this time and sharing your expertise with us. So we really appreciate it.
And I thank you very much for asking me to be with you on this. I think it's very important to the health and wellness of not just clarinetists, but all musicians.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you and welcome.